Hello, Dr. Andreas. Thank you for joining me. I, Given that the Western world is going through a state of turmoil at the moment, with certain ideologies such as the woke phenomenon and the just the general turmoil at the moment from both the Western world and even the Western Europe and the Anglo-West. I think it's important to realize its foundations and traditions so we can understand how it could be facing such a dilemma in its current times. So I was hoping if you could go into detail on really explaining the fundamental philosophies that created the modern day Western world.
Yeah, Daniel, first of all, thanks for having me here and inaugurating this sort of discussion. I hope it keeps on going. It's not just a one go. But to go straight to your question and start in a sort of a provocative way, the West, or what we call Western civilization, is basically based on one basic philosophy. There's always been one philosophy, if we want to be really honest, and that has always been the philosophy of Plato. Now, we like thinking of a differentiation between Plato and Aristotle, but Aristotle is basically a variation of Plato, not really a differentiation. Now, of course, there are philosophies that have, as variations of the basic fundamental Platonic tradition of the West, informed the latest civilization. And those philosophies we could generally put under two names. One philosophy is the philosophy of realism, and the other is the philosophy of nominalism. That is the philosophy that there are ultimately realities out there and in here. And the philosophy that everything is just a name. Just a name.
Is that getting in? Sorry? Yeah, is that getting into another way of saying there are two realities, the physical and the metaphysical? Or is that
no. It's not it's not just that. That's a sort of a phenomenon. Basically, these two ideologies, because at the end of the day they become ideologies. They start as philosophies, but they become ideologies, are expressing the same ontological framework, the same metaphysics. It's just a difference in terms of emphasis. Realism stresses the objective. The objective. Not that it does not accept and subjective, but it stresses the objective. And nominalism emphasizes the subjective. So this sort of dialectics, or if you like, pair, traditional and conventional, and commonplace pair we talk about, the object and the subject. This is a sort of tug of war that between the two forces that have formed European philosophy. Now, from a certain point onwards, we dubbed the realistic variation Platonic, and the nominalistic variation Aristotelian. But this is something that happened in the late Middle Ages with the scholastics, and it was carried on as a legacy through modernity up to nowadays. It has no basis in the work of the real, Plato, or the real Aristotle. It's just a way that Western thinkers found in order to, they invented it, they found it in order to justify and substantiate their own differences as realists and nominalists, based on, of course, the ontology, the philosophical tradition they were discovering in ancient texts, classical texts, in the late Middle Ages, and of course the period of the Renaissance, and after that till our days. So basically, philosophically, the West has never been pluralistic. Never. It's totalitarian. One philosophy comprises the totality of the Western mindset. That's not the Platonic philosophy. It's not the Aristotelian philosophy. It's a philosophy created on the basis of these figures, invoking these figures for purposes of justification, but it's basically what I would personally call a Christianized version of Hellenic ontology. And basically, it's a Western Christianized version of Hellenic philosophy. So if we want to summarize, this, yes, philosophy has been, underpinning Western civilization, very much so, but it has been doing this job basically in a monophonic way, not in a pluralistic way, although appearances seem to be saying a different story, but we know that appearances can be deceptive.
Okay, that is surprising to hear, considering the traditional thought is the Western world is created, I suppose, really during the Enlightenment, and it's all about pluralism, and in the modern day conceptions of multicultural, open thinking, the scientific revolution. So it's very surprising to hear that no, it's actually monolithic, if not totalitarian, especially when compared to certain other cultures and civilizations, which we would think was actually totalitarian, and the West was actually the open one. For example, the Soviet Union versus the West, or extremist Islamist forces versus the Western world, and even modern day China and the West. We would typically see those countries or those worldviews as being totalitarian, and the West wasn't, or it didn't used to be. So by your saying the very foundations of the West was totalitarian. Given that totalitarianism, I don't think. Yeah.
If I may, Daniel, just interrupt you. I'm not saying that the West is the only totalitarian paradigm. I'm just pointing out that it is ultimately totalitarian. Not in the same way, but in a similar way to other totalitarianisms. The idea of totality is so appealing, is so lurid, that humans seldom have, resisted it. So
could that actually explain, with the fall of the Soviet Union, we had the West declaring the end of history, and then we had globalization. and where the Western world spread itself. Would that be a real life indication or example where, yes, at the end of the day, the West was totalitarian. It wanted to totalize the world. And with this adversary, the Soviet Union, fallen, they thought that was the opportunity to do so, and they took it. So in their moment of truth, they actually proved themselves to be a form of totalitarianism themselves.
We could say that, and we could also, say a lot of other things. The thing is, what I want to stress is, and if we just recall, Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations, there has never been a clash of civilizations in such, let's say, neutral terms. It has always been a clash of totalitarianism. Has always been a clash of claims, competing claims of who represents, who exemplifies, and who, at the end of the day, is the legitimate total, the legitimate totality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a totalitarian system, and here perhaps we have to, sort of distinguish between philosophical totalitarianism and political totalitarianism. The political, is a certain mutation of philosophical. And perhaps vice versa, we could say this. But we shouldn't, just think of philosophy and politics being the exact equivalent. They are, related intrinsically, but they're not the exact equivalent. Now, you said before that in the modern world, the postmodern world, we have this so big, huge, emphasis on difference, on pluralism. Yes, we do, but within the frame.
Mm-hmm.
The frame is one. The frame of the state of power. How we understand state and power, nowadays in international terms, in global terms. That frame is one. You can play within it in whatever way you like, but you cannot challenge it. It's like, a field of football, or soccer. You play, whatever moves you like. You could be Pele or Maradona or Ronaldo. You choose your style. We allow you this differentiation, this plurality, but you play according to the rules of soccer. You don't play basketball. You don't play cricket.
Right.
So in this way, the total, any total, not just West total, any total, does not, by definition, invalidate or negate the individual as such. It doesn't. The individual can be whatever it possibly can be, only within the frame of the total. It's not the other way around. Of course, when you have the other way around things, when the individual becomes the total, when the individual, absorbs the idea of totality so much that it embodies it, and it becomes sort of a loose cannon, then practically, it's what we mean when we use the word anarchy. And now
Anarchy.
you have anarchy. Yeah. Can you have an anarchy-based order? Order.
Yes, I was about to say, totalitarianism is a centralization. And if a person embodies the totalitarian, I would think they will become a tyrant. But you're saying, no, the other way around, they will become anarchy.
If an individual absorbs, internalizes the total to such a degree, that they become one with it. In ancient Greek thought, political thought, for instance, this was the ideal of autonomy. Anarchy in ancient Greece is not what we call anarchy, in the modern age.
Mm-hmm.
Different. Anarchy in ancient Greece is autonomy. It's that you don't have any principle, any power above you. You don't obey to anything that is above you, but you yourself have become the criteria and the source of law. You don't need a law out there telling you what you need to do, because you yourself, you know what to do. You have become, in a way, an embodied law, and you don't need law anymore. This is not an ideal, because it was an ideal. It's not an ideal, a lawless ideal. No, it's an ideal where law, order, becomes one with the subject. You know, in philosophy and basically in gnoseology, we have these systems where the subject and the object become one. And then we have intuition, we have direct, intimate knowledge. In politics, when the subject and the object become one, when the subject, the political subject, and the law, order become one, that's when we have autonomy. That's when we have, in ancient Greek terms, anarchia, anarchy. Now, that's not the case, of course, in postmodern or late modernity. But I'm just saying these things so we don't take for granted that totality just dispenses with the individual, the subject. No, at all. Not at all. It's just a new sort of reshuffling of all these things. Now, which if we want to, go into evaluations, which totalitarianism is worse, that's not an easy question.
Well,
but it's on the context.
So would it be accurate to say that the geopolitical world is a international oligarchy of different totalitarian systems?
Competing ones.
Competing for domination.
Yeah.
In the past, would it be the British Empire? Would it be the Soviet Union? Would it be the United States? Will it be now China? So is that the history of the world? Competing totalitarian systems for control, for dominance.
Look, it's not an easy thing to talk about, such general, topics like the history of the world. But we could say that. Another thing I would like to, just mention is that totalitarianism is one thing, but expansionism, like when we say imperialism. What's imperialism? Imperialism is a certain type of totalitarianism, which means a totalitarianism that expands. For instance, I'll just give you an example. It's a bit raw, but I think it's very vivid. In Australia, before the coming of the whites, we had I would say perhaps 400-500 totalitarians.
Mm-hmm.
Each land, each
tribe,
group of people on a specific, very meticulously and very emphatically circumscribed piece of land was a totality, that didn't need anything, basically.
Right.
It was autonomous, but it wasn't independent. It was aware of other totalities around it, and it negotiated with them, but it did not compete. So here we have a system of totalities, really,
coexisting with each other.
Yeah, but they have found a way to coexist by negotiating what we would call scarcity or lack. So I know I'm a totality. I know that in myself, I am what I need to be. But I also know, I'm not blind to that. I also know what I don't have, what I need. and what I need, for instance, in terms of natural resources, comes from another totality. So I allow the totality to be in a connection with me because I need something that I lack, and I give to the other totality what they lack. So in this way, each totality is reinforced as a totality.
Mhm.
Now, you have a totalitarianism like the West, which is a totality that expands and takes over other totalities, if she can, of course,
Mhm.
through force, through various forms of power, or in religious terms, you have religions which are, by definition, expansionist. Expansionist. This doesn't mean that they are, worse than other religions. No, but they are. For instance, Islam is expansionist.
Mhm.
It wants the peace of Allah to conquer the earth. The peace of Allah to conquer the earth. Now, Christianity can be expansionary, can have this expansive sort of element, but it may not have it. It's
It can go either way.
Ecumenical. It's what we call an ecumenical religion. What's an ecumenical religion? It's a religion that functions as a totality of lifestyle, of being, of existence, of experience, a totality. It's only me. You cannot have me with something else. Now, you have this totality, but it is a totality that claims, wants to, aspires, to be accepted.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean necessarily that it's, imperialistic, has this sort of, expansing and conquering sort of nature. But it can have, and we have seen that, in holy wars and crusades and other forms of, Christian experience and consciousness. I don't know if I'm helping you with this.
No, it's very interesting. But I would like to delve in a little bit more in depth, focusing on the Western world in itself, the fundamental philosophies and traditions that gave us what is the modern day West.
The modern day West rests on a very specific, idea. God, if there is a God, he's out there. He's not here. He's doing his own job. He's not doing any job with us here. If there is a God. If there's no God, okay, that's even better for us. Okay, in what way? If there is a God, we, do his work here. We, the West.
Mhm.
And either way, the West has exiled, God into the heavens, or made him disappear. God stopped.
Well, that's the Nietzschean God
So
is
that
dead.
they can substantiate their absolute total right, to do what God would do if he was here. If God was here, he would have an ultimate, a total and an absolute right to do anything. So we are here and we do that. Does this explain the destruction of natural environment? Of course it does. It's a mentality, that we have, the right, that we have as God, in the place of God, to create history. And this creation of history is our absolute creation.
I think we're approaching the 40-minute mark, so I think I might have to reconnect with you again to continue the conversation. But coming up next, I would still like to go in a little bit more in depth as in Platonism, the philosophies of the Roman, basically what brought us to the modern day world. Roman Empire, Age of Enlightenment, and so forth.
Yeah.
Mm.
My answer is we have come where we are now through successive waves of secularization. So, basically, these waves are three waves. The first wave of secularization is the initial, let's say, the original secularization of the church, of Christianity, that becomes the dominant ideology in the West let's say, late antiquity. When that happens, the church, substitutes for God. The second wave of secularization is when this substitution, this historicization of the church becomes an institutionalization in very, let's say, extreme terms, radical terms, where the institutions of the church become basically the tools of history building. So the first one is the church substitutes for the role of God in history. The second is church becomes an institution, or a power institution. And the third phase of secularization is when the two first waves of internal Christian secularization seize or take off their Christian clothes, and they become meta-Christian. So they, in a way, remain Christian without seemingly being so. So basically, the West nowadays is as Christian as it could be, without showing off as Christian, or without needing to show off as Christian. I don't know if this makes sense, these successive waves of secularization.
It does to a point, but I am interested in the idea of Christianity being meta-Christian, given that the modern day, almost postmodern rejection, if not contempt, for Christianity and its traditions and its ideas and the rise of secular religions like communism, socialism, wokeism, and all the other modern day isms. So
basically variations, basically the variations, these are variations on the theme of Christian structure, on the theme of of history building through the agency of the human that has become God.
I would say, would Marxism be a perfect example of a secularized Christian blueprint?
Of course, but it is as much as liberalism.
Right.
Marxism only has this apocalyptic messianic, more accentuated, sort of features, whereas liberalism has this more gnostic and libertarian sort of counters. But both of them belong to the same, Christian structure. The one is more apocalyptic, the other more gnostic.
Right. Okay.
The one more realist and the other more nominalist.
Okay. Well, that is interesting, considering the Marxist would be condemning the liberal for not being Christian enough, given your analogy.
But hasn't that been the history we know from the church and the heresies?
Very true.
The thesis war has been within the church. Who has the truth? You or me?
Right. Okay. Going on for what you've just said about the three waves of secularization, have we got to the point where we've secularized too much to the point of, I suppose, self-hatred. There seems to be a real modern day contempt for Western thought and tradition and Christianity. It seems to be all the modern day variants, whether people even realize it is Christian variants to begin with. They seem to be rather want to adopt that as opposed to the normal traditional idea of Christianity. Why do you think that has happened? Or do you think that that has even happened at all?
No, it has happened, and I think that the explanation lies in the way that Christianity was construed and experienced in terms of consciousness, from a certain point onwards. Once Christianity as a totalitarianism was understood in radical, extreme, exclusivist terms, then you have this Cold War sort of, say, attitude or structure. But Christianity was not always a totalitarianism of this exclusive type. You can have a totalitarianism and that being inclusive. One of the good things, for instance, with our sense of totalitarianism nowadays, is that it hasn't achieved yet, it attempts to be inclusive. A totalitarianism under which, everything goes. Everything has a place. The problem here is with this everything.
Well, having said that, would that be an example I've noticed is other religions, such as found in Islam, Judaism, or any other religion. They are very much unapologetic of what they believe. They don't care if it's considered politically correct or nice. They basically own themselves and go, this is us, this is what we believe in. If you don't like it, tough luck. It seems to be the Christian religion on its own that seems to be constantly wanting to be accepted and keeps on reforming itself to the point of no one really takes it seriously anymore.
Yeah, but
why do you think that has happened? Why just the Christian as opposed to the other ones? Why do you think the Christian religion has been the one that wanted to basically reform itself into nothingness?
Yes, I suppose this is so because it's in Christianity, and when I say Christianity, I don't mean just the religion. I just don't mean a religious phenomenon. We should never forget that when we talk about Christianity nowadays, we're talking about a religion, but at the same time, we're talking about a structure, a mentality, a consciousness. So in the case of Christianity, the issue of otherness, radical otherness, sheer otherness, is present and problematized in different terms than, in my view, we don't find in any religion. So in a way, this relationship with otherness, being so much internalized, part and parcel of your own, structure, makes you having a problem with your own self, because you have internalized so much otherness, sheer otherness, radical otherness, that self, what as same, yourself, the same, cannot stand anymore as such. it's shattered. So in this sense, Christianity, in a way, presents a solution, but at the same time a problem, because this is a solution. This internalization of radical otherness. When I say radical otherness, I mean to have a God who is not a God.
Mm-hmm.
To have a God who is not a God. To have the living Christ who is not alive. To have a God, who is present but is absent. This sort of, internal, intrinsic dialectics just tear apart the Christian experience and the Christian consciousness. Existential. And that's how a Christian thrives, through this, being torn apart. Now, this can be a solution. Why? Because you allow otherness to be with you and you to be with them. But at the same time, you allow to such a degree, that you are ready, to abandon yourself.
But having said that, that may be true and compared to Christianity compared to other religions. But if we look at Christianity compared to itself, for example, the Orthodox Christianity found particularly in Greece and Eastern Europe, compared to the more Anglo-Western European Vatican Christianity, you don't see that happening right across the Christian spectrum. You see that in particularly in the Western tradition, not in the Orthodox tradition. The Orthodox tradition seems to be more traditional and old school, and more this is us, like it or leave it, as opposed to the West, which is more wanting to reform itself and take in everything. Why do you think that is happening?
At the purely religious level, but the West does not allow anyone to challenge it in the non-religious, at the non-religious level. As a non-religious Christianity, this is not my, the sort of expression, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Lutheran theologian, the anti-Nazi theologian, was the first one to, conceptualize systematically this concept of a non-religious religion, a non-religious Christianity. So in the West, this non-religious Christianity, which the West, is at the end of the day, this one that does not accept any sort of challenge, any sort of question. It accepts questioning of its religious past, traditions, ceremonies, habits, values, all the hocus pocus sort of stuff, but not the structure of the dialectics between the same and the other, and the way this can be realized in history. And that's why history is it's not a let's say a series of progress. It's a series of destruction. It's a series of destruction after destruction. Through destruction, you progress, you proceed. Progress, and at the end of the day, is destruction of the past for the sake of the present, in light of the future. It's always, the future. And it's always, this dialectics of tearing apart. And because you cannot tear apart yourself at the end of the day, you tear apart, what is around you.
Well, until you do tear yourself apart, which is what's happening today.
Basically, this is an expression of yourself being torn apart.
So
it's not just about, confessional thing, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestants, basically all Christians, even Oriental Christians, Copts or other sort of, all Christians, at the end of the day, are not just informed, but determined by this internalization of radical otherness, which cannot, be, let's say, cannot be, you cannot take it anymore. It's so overwhelming and so devastating that we cannot take it anymore. And it's expressed, through this sort of, maniac drive of creating history through destruction again and again and again and again. That's why in an insatiable, manner.
So do you think the Western world has finally got to the point where it's basically exhausted? That's why we're turning inwards and we're tearing ourselves apart, and we can't.
It's gonna be exhausted when it's when it's dead.
When it's dead.
Dead. When it falls down, dead, and it's dead, really dead, then it's going to be exhausted. Otherwise, it cannot be exhausted. That's the raison d'être, of the West.
But are we dying then? Are we not dead yet? But are we on the way? Are we dying?
Well, we are a dead civilization. Do we know any other civilization, that has such a fascination with death as the West? The very fact that we don't want to talk about death, the very fact that we don't want to think about death, is because we have such a problem, an obsessive blind spot, which is death itself. And at the end of the day, this is the death of Christ. This is the problem of death, the enigma of death as the enigma of the empty tomb. This is our problem, death.
But
the individual has become so inflated with Christianity, because God is supposed to be, the absolute, the most general. And in Christianity, you have a God who is not a God. Why is that? Because you have the most specific individual, Jesus Christ, most specific. It cannot be more specific than that. Living here, living there, doing this, sheer specificity, and that is God. But God is supposed to be the most generic, the most general, the most universal, the most, huge, ultimate thing. So when you have this specificity as being, what is not supposed to be God, here you have, a clash, a dialectic, let's say, collapse of the whole system. And this one dies and is away, absent. Even though it's present through experience, physically, historically, it's absent. Otherwise, you don't have, the meaning of Christian hope and Christian expectation for, the second coming.
But still, I would say you will not. You still don't see the same amount of contempt and anger towards the Christian church and religion as in Eastern Europe, for example, compared to the Anglo-West. And they're both Christian, so they both believe in death and Jesus and all that. But could it be the fact that the West was under communism for so long? They know what it's like to be living with under a system that is, godless, and now they have returned back to it in the post-communist age, and that's why they've reconnected with their religion, as opposed to the West, where we've kind of went the other way.
Look, we say this easily, sort of, with that, communism is a godless system. But what's the Western system? What's the liberal system? Is it less godless? I don't think so. It's not less godless.
Well, it wasn't
In
militaristically.
godless Russia, communist Russia, we have, we have, hundreds and thousands of people experiencing God and
Well,
making, what we call the religious renaissance of Russia possible. How
but that
can
was
we have a religious renaissance in Russia if that system was totally godless?
well, it was done underground, though. I mean, the system itself was militaristically
Yeah,
atheist. He had contempt for religion. It closed down the churches.
yeah. Because it was God
banned.
itself. It was God itself. It was the church.
Has the roles reversed now? Has the West now become a God itself,
Yeah.
like you were saying earlier, and the Eastern Europe has kind of gone back to the old way of not being God itself, having experienced
The West was always that. The West was always that, and communist Russia just brought it out in a very, let's say, crude and unsophisticated way, in my opinion. The West has always been more sophisticated and let's say more, cunning, smart, in concealing the real structure of its power. But nowadays, this is not needed anymore. Not needed. Not that they have a problem, You can be a religious if you like. Be. Okay. I mean, your religion or your religious consciousness, it has to be, at the end of the day, under the umbrella of the secular state power, which is, in its own terms, totalitarian. So you said before that no religion accepts that any belief beyond their own beliefs. That's true, but why should they? Religions are totalitarian. Why should they accept any other thing that would challenge their totality? They wouldn't be a totalitarian there. They wouldn't be religions. Religion is about all, everything or nothing. You cannot be religious, like lukewarm, like in between.
But that was my point, though. The in the West, in the Anglo-Western world, always wanting to reform itself and is no longer, to use your words, is no longer totalitarian anymore, because it reformed itself. It was open towards itself. It kept on splintering off so many different offshoots and sects. Is it still Christianity anymore if it keeps on reforming itself into, because it wants to appease everyone, as opposed to the other religions of the world where, as you say, it's totalitarian and this is us and tough luck. So why has this occurred? Is it the Nietzschean, we killed God and now we're looking for a replacement?
No, I look, change and transformation are parts of human history anyway. The thing that we have change and differentiation and reformation, and attempts to accommodate things, this doesn't, negate or doesn't go against totalitarianism. It just, shows that, there are more hues and more shades in the let's say the repertoire of totalitarianism. The West is so, I would say it this way, the West is so totalitarian, that it can't accept anything. So that right. it becomes more powerful.
So that goes back to what you were saying. The West is so totalitarian it can become anarchy. In a way, it's let's say totalitarian anarchy. It's at the large scale. At the large scale. Right. Okay.
You could say that. It's a totalitarian anarchy.
Yeah, it's quite the oxymoron, but yeah.
Can you think of yourself as challenging, radically, yeah? in practical terms, everyday terms, through your specific moves. Can you imagine that you don't accept the law, you don't accept rationality, you don't accept science, you don't accept progress? If you go against these things, progress, science, rationalism, the law, if you go against these things, you will just be obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not killed, as you would be killed, in the communist, let's say Russia,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to die slowly, gradually, and excruciatingly. At the end of the day, you're going to die. You have to die.
Well, in a way,
the West,
right.
at basis. Not individual, whole countries, whole nations, other totalitarianisms, they are not supposed to challenge. You can be, your Muslim civilization. You can be Muslim, but within these parameters, the parameters, set by rationalism, science, law, my law, okay, and progress. Within those parameters, be Muslim, be anti-Muslim, be whatever you like, Christian, be an atheist, be whatever you like, but you're going to serve these pillars, okay? If Islam has its pillars, you are going to serve these pillars, and you're going to uphold these pillars. Rationalism, science, progress, law.
What an example of this type of totalitarianism can be found in the example of, ancient Rome. Ancient Rome was multi-ethnic, multi-imperialistic. You took over so many different areas, incorporated so many different religions and ethnicities and cultures. But at the end of the day, it was, when in Rome, do as Romans do. In other words, the host culture was Roman. So you can be whatever you want, but don't you ever try to overthrow
law,
the culture.
Law.
It's still Roman.
Yeah, the understanding of law, the understanding of the state, the power,
Well, given that you say that the West is totalitarian in your definition, could that be traced back to the ancient world of Rome? You just transport it into the modern day world?
Look,
that type of thinking exists?
For me, genealogically, this is related to a very Christian mutation of capital and legacies of the ancient world, which Christianity incorporated but transformed. It does not go directly back to the ancient world, although it echoes the ancient world. Not only the Roman Empire, any empire of old, had this sort of mentality. Be what you are within the framework I set. But we shouldn't forget what are we really talking about when we talk about, the state and power and empires in the ancient world. They are more things of the symbolic order than really the kind of imperial geopolitical entities we have experienced in modernity. So you have an emperor, a Byzantine emperor. Let's take the example from the Eastern Roman Empire, the Christian emperor, the Byzantine emperor. The Byzantine emperor is a symbolic figure, the ultimate symbolic figure of order, unity, of belonging in a certain world, in a certain time, space, continuum, in a certain life world. Your allegiance to this figure, acceptance of it, okay, through a variety of ceremonies or practices, or even beliefs, I would say makes you a Byzantine. makes you part of the Byzantine Empire. It's not that the Byzantine Emperor completely controls in, let's say, bureaucratic, rationalistic, hierarchical nomenclature, sort of infrastructure, the whole empire that we see usually on the map, those maps, the historical maps, most of them having the half of the world, belonging to an empire. But that was only a map, bureaucracy, nomenclature, rationalism, are things that come with modernity. That's when the map we see, the historical map, the lands of an empire, becomes really reified as an object. And I'm not just as an emperor now, a symbolic figure of allegiance, an alliance, of belonging, but now I'm a figure on the top of a pyramid, of a centralized government that through specific procedures, rationalistically, systematically pursued and expanded and developed and controlled it. And this control we see nowadays, as we have never seen before.
Right.
So yes, it goes back in terms of a general echo. As far as totality is alluring, let's say, ideal for any human. Yes, it echoes ancient cultures, but it's different. It doesn't go back to them genealogically. Genealogically, it resides within Christianity. Look, Christianity has always been the problem. Christianity has always been the problem. And the only way out of it, of solving it, is through Christianity. Christianity is the problem and it's the solution. If we want to get out of this, ecological, problem, the destruction of human resources, human and natural resources, of not having enough time, of this self-destruction progress we are, on the last 200 years. If we want to change this course of things, we have to become afresh, again, a different type of Christian.
Right.
And this, in my opinion, cannot be religious Christian. We have to leave the religious tradition of Christianity and find Christianity as a non-religious, inclusive, dialogic, and really communal, not just communicatory, communal sort of existence. It's going to be totalitarian, yeah, again, because it's going to be totality, but it's going to be inclusive and, let's say, allowing a communal, a real sort of coexistence. Now, how is this going to be possible? I don't know. But usually when you have a problem, you go back to the cause, the source of the problem, and you try to, see things again. It's like a problem. When you get somewhere and you say, that's not a solution, it's wrong. You go back. You go back and start again. In a way, we have to start again being Christians. But this time, we have to start again being, let's say, it sounds like a truism, or more like commonplace. Real Christians, like let's try being authentic Christians. But what's that? Again, there's a risk here because we don't know what it's like to be a real Christian. We don't know really. We just have to go back and start again. I don't know if we are bold enough, if we are mature enough, if we are, really conscientious enough, if we are responsible enough.
Well, we could go on forever talking about this.
I suppose so.
It's
Yeah.
very interesting. But on that note, I think that's a good note to leave things.
So we
And
don't have any more time.
sorry.
Don't have any more time.
Well, we if you have more time, we can keep on going if you like.
How much time do we have? How long can we go on?
I think another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Because you had some other questions there.
Yes, but the all will end up being in-depth
What was the third
answers.
one? Sorry, Daniel, the third one.
The third was the Western world. Has the Western world been worshipping at the cult of Dionysus for too long?
The fourth one, sorry.
The fourth one. Where is it? Is it fair to say that the Chinese civilization has a predisposition for authoritarianism?
Okay, now you see here, this is a different concept now. This is authoritarianism. We talked about totalitarianism, we talked about imperialism, expansionism, authoritarianism. These things should not be conflated. And it's very, I think it's very pertinent, because if we just pick up where I left before, can we have a totalitarianism? That is, can we have a reinvented, recreated, re-experienced Christianity that is non-authoritarian? This can only be the case if totalitarianism and authoritarianism are not the same. They don't go necessarily together. Do they? In my opinion, they do not go. You have a total, let's say, worldview, a totality, having the consciousness that it's what it is, a totalitarianism that is, in indigenous Australia, and in many places, all around the place. But never such a totalitarianism has been authoritarian.
Well,
we don't know of any indigenous Australian, I would say, totalitarian, worldview being authoritarian. So this is a fact, a real life fact, that authoritarianism and totalitarianism don't go together.
well,
By the same token, you could have Christianity of the future, Christianity, I would aspire for, without it being authoritarian. But now it is.
I understand so what you're saying, the difference being Christianity and the West can be totalitarian in the sense of being universal, but the totality, as you say, but the difference between that and an authoritarianism would be the authoritarianism it's another form of universalism, which is top-down order to the point of crushing the individual and other pluralistic notions.
Yes, if I understand correctly the way you put it. But totalitarianism, philosophically, does not need to be, an ideology. It doesn't. You can, have a view, and this view being held by you as the only total truth, without turning into an ideology. How is this? How is this possible? This is possible, for instance, if this view is, in one way, I'll just give you one way, radically internalized. Radically internalized. If you are not saying that this view, is natural out there, but it's my experience, then your view does not become an ideology. A basic element for ideology is that what is claimed by the ideology is natural, is out there, objective, real. So if my view is presented as being the natural order of things out there, really, then it becomes an ideology. But if my view is a radically internalized view that sustains me, that gives me, you know, the drive and the meaning to live in a total way, that, you know, takes under its control all aspects of my life, then it's not ideological, and it does not become authoritarian, you know, by definition or by necessity or in advance. No, it doesn't. So we should distinguish again philosophical totalitarianism from ideological totalitarianism, which then is prone to political authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a political idea, it's a political notion category, not an ideological one, you know, and mostly not a philosophical one.
But all ideologies initially start as a philosophy or an idea before it becomes an ideology. So how
necessarily they start as an idea, but not as a philosophy. Philosophy is something very, very specific and very, very let's say precise, rigorous. Not anything we think or anything, you know, we come up with is a philosophy.
right?
That's an Anglo-Saxon, you know, sort of commonplace, let's say, silly notion that anything you think is a philosophy. Everyone has their own philosophy. No, it doesn't work like that. Philosophy is a very disciplined way of thinking. Now, of course, ideologists start with ideas as concepts, but basically philosophers who, you know, are really rigorous and really, you know, stick to their art and experience of searching for truth, they don't become, let's say, victims of ideologies or two ideologies. They don't fall victims. They may, but they don't. Generally, if they are philosophers, no. Even if they are, and most philosophers are totalitarian philosophers. There's no such thing as a non-totalitarian philosopher.
Okay,
that's why, you know, these great philosophers, Levinas and Derrida, these Jewish, you know, background philosophers, had so much, you know, they got, let's say, the shits, allow me to say it this way, with the Greek philosophers, because they thought, you know, that they had conquered everything. They had made everything, you know, be under the boot of their, let's say, authority, not authoritarianism, but authority. But they did say that because they came from a background, they had another, you know, sort of, you know, point of view, the Jewish point of view, which is not philosophical, but narratological. The Jewish worldview is about a narrative. It's about a story. It's about, you know, saying things the way they happen. And in this way, they, you know, were always, you know, in this sort of fight with their really cherished great Greek thinkers, because they represented the other side, the conceptual, universal worldview of truth, not what you see in front of you, of fact. It's fact against truth. Facts are very specific. Truth is general.
Okay, but having said that, how could a society which is open-minded, you know, in the Western case, Christian and all that, how could it turn from that into under an authoritarian system? You would think the notion of authoritarianism would be so against that way of thinking that no way it could happen, but it happens all the time. you know, for example, Weimar Republic to Nazi Germany, the Orthodox Christian Eastern Europe under communism. Some would say even modern day within the West with the whole COVID, you know, reaction, how authoritarian the Anglo-West has become in response to that.
No,
How can a people go from that to accepting, even passively, an authoritarianism?
no,
Could it be a case of being totalitarian or and wanting too much order?
no. To be honest, personally, and to be in a way realistic, I don't think that, you know, what we are experiencing for the last 2,000 years or even more, it's going to just go away. Just like that. What I'm saying, or what I'm, you know, hoping for, is that, you know, what we know from experience, that life has many aspects. For instance, what we're doing right now is an aspect of life, you know, modern life, postmodern life. We would like to think, you know, over against authoritarianism, over against totalitarianism, for instance. It's being more of a different thing, you know. Is this allowed? Is this possible? Yes, it is. We're doing it right now. When we sleep and we dream, you know, we dream of, you know, green pastures. We dream of our utopias, for instance, or our nightmares, or when we fall in love, or when we go to work and we do this or that, or when we are helped by people, or when we help people, or when we hate. And life goes on. There's lots of aspects in life. I'm just saying that we should start becoming more and more subversive, more and more subversive. I believe in, you know, the radical, subversive, and at the same time, sort of harassment politics that we can put in place. What's a harassment politics? It's, you know, to be in the system, and, you know, from the inside, trying to make it explode, creating problems. It's not going to explode totally. No, it's very strong. It's not going to explode totally. But I can see an explosion as a totality in itself. If the system is a totality that cannot be, you know, overwhelmed, an explosion within it can be a sort of different totality that can be enough for you, me, 5 others, 5,000 others, 5 million others. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter really. Numbers don't matter. It's not always an issue of quantity. It's also an issue of quality. And you don't know what a small explosion projected to the future of 100 or 1,000 years can look like. Could anyone, you know, just imagine what a bunch of, you know, ragtag people in Judea 2,000 years ago would look like? Could anyone imagine what they could look like after 2,000 years? No. So I would end at least this second part, because I think we're going to have more parts. I would end this second part with this very optimistic note that we have to resist, we have to subvert, we have to harass politically, so that we create the explosions, the small explosions that keep us alive, keep us enlightened, and we never know where they're gonna lead others. We never know this in the long run.
Mhm. Okay, well, on that note, I think that's a good way to actually end this interview, at least for this chapter.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for coming on. And I hope to have you again soon.